My son thought he could take away my empire with a smile and a cruise ticket to the Founders' Gala. He never imagined that the covenant contract I gave them was loaded with a debt that would bury him. Welcome to Stories of Auntie Maya. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Drop a comment down below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I read every single comment, and it helps me to know I'm not alone in this. My name is Eleanor Margaret Stevens. Most people in Charleston still call me Madam Chairwoman, though the title feels like an old coat I have worn so long the seams have forgotten they were ever separate. I am 71 years old. People think I am hard. They see the tall windows of Stevens Holdings downtown, the 37 floors of glass and steel that carry our name in brushed gold letters, and they imagine I was born inside a vault. I was 24 when Reginald Stevens walked into my tiny office, took off his hat and said, "Miss Eleanor, I hear you can turn water into money." I married him 6 months later. We turned a great deal of water into money together. Julian came 2 years after that. A beautiful boy, loud lungs, soft curls, always reaching for anything that sparkled. I thought love would be enough to teach him weight. It was not. I have carried this family on my back since the day the doctor closed Reginald's eyes. Board meetings at dawn, diapers at midnight, hospital visits when Julian wrapped his Porsche around a tree at 19, the quiet signing of checks to make scandals disappear, the louder signing of checks to keep the company alive when the market crashed and everyone said we would fold. I did not fold. I stood in that cold boardroom alone so many times I stopped counting. They still clapped when I walked in. Out of habit or fear, I never asked which. And now they want to retire me. My own son and the daughter-in-law he married for her father's Senate seat. They have planned a grand celebration tomorrow night. The Founders' Gala, black tie, crystal chandeliers, the same room where I once danced with Reginald until the orchestra begged to go home. They will put me on the stage like a cherished antique, hand me a cruise ticket with a satin bow, and ask me, sweetly, to step aside forever. And tonight, in the quiet before the gala, I am finishing the last stroke of a plan that will either redeem us all or burn everything to ash. Let me tell you exactly how it began. Tonight I am holding the covenant deed in my lap. It is heavier than it looks. Thick cream paper, gold seal, the same document my Reginald signed the day he placed the entire Stevens fortune into a trust that only I could open. I have just finished attaching something to it, a single slim folder clipped beneath the ribbon, invisible unless someone is foolish enough to tear the seal. Inside that folder is the doomsday key. One signature from Julian tomorrow night will unlock it, and when it opens, everything he thinks he has stolen from me will devour him instead. I slide the folder into place, close the leather cover, and tie the ribbon exactly as it was. Perfect, innocent, deadly. Tomorrow night, Julian will stand on that stage and take everything he thinks belongs to him. And the moment his pen touches the paper, the doomsday key will turn. The debt I have carried alone for years will become his debt. The lawsuits I buried will rise up and swallow him. The banks I begged will close their teeth. And when he runs to me for rescue, I will already be on a plane, ticket paid for by the son who wanted me gone. Tomorrow the gala begins, and the real story starts with champagne and applause, and the soft hidden click of a trap closing forever. The Stevens Holdings Tower rises 37 floors above Charleston, like a blade of glass pushed into the night sky. From the street it looks invincible, lights burning gold against the low-country dark, a monument men built to prove they could own even the horizon. Inside the top-floor boardroom, the air is colder than any January wind off the Atlantic. The long mahogany table reflects nothing but shadows now. Every chair is empty, except the one at the head, the one that has carried my weight for 15 years since they lowered Reginald into the ground. I stand alone beneath the portrait of my husband. The artist caught him at 55, the year the cancer was still only a rumor. His eyes are kind but unflinching. the same eyes that once looked at me across a muddy rice field and said, "Eleanor, we are going to build something this town will never forget." We did, and tonight I am the only one left to remember the cost. I have spent more nights here than in my own bed since the funeral. This table has heard me cry exactly twice. Both times I wiped my face before the sun came up. Outside, the city glitters. The battery curves below, gas lamps glowing along the high wall where cannons once waited for wars that never came. Beyond that, the Ashley and Cooper rivers slide together, dark and patient, carrying secrets out to sea. I built half the condominiums that sparkle along their banks. I signed the permits while Julian was still failing algebra. I smiled at zoning boards while he was learning to smile at girls who wanted his name more than his heart. The portrait watches me the way Reginald used to watch me balance books at 2 a.m, coffee gone cold, baby monitor glowing green on the desk. He never asked me to choose between family and empire. He simply trusted I would find a way to carry both. I did. Until carrying both began to kill what little goodness was left inside my son. At the far end, the city spreads wider, Fort Sumter a low shadow on the water, reminding every generation that pride goes down hard when it finally goes down. I wonder if Julian has ever stood here long enough to feel the weight of all this glass and steel resting on shoulders that were never strong enough. My phone vibrates against the polished wood, a small, angry bee. The screen lights up. Harold Whitcomb, chief accountant. The only man still alive who knows exactly how many graves I have dug with money to keep this family breathing. I answer without greeting. "Madam," his voice cracks like thin ice, "Julian's deficit. It has exceeded the expected offset. Another $4 million gone in 90 days. The harbor project is bleeding us dry, and the banks are asking questions I can no longer answer with creative accounting." I close my eyes. $4 million. The exact amount I moved last month to keep the lights on in the mansion so Charlotte could study without noticing the darkness closing in. "Thank you, Harold," I say, calm as the river at slack tide. "File everything exactly as it is. Tomorrow night the board will see whatever Julian chooses to show them." A pause long enough to hear his heart stutter. "Madam, if this surfaces before the gala, it will surface when it must," I cut in gently. "Good night, Harold." "Long enough," I answer silently. Long enough for one blind boy to believe the kingdom is finally his. The tower lights blink red far out over the water, warning planes away from what we built. Inside this room, the air itself feels heavier, as though the building understands what is coming and has decided to hold its breath with me. This perfect upper-class picture, darling, the one they print in glossy magazines with all of us smiling on the veranda at Christmas, is already cracked straight through the middle. And the fracture started the day my son decided ambition was the same as ability. I leave the cold tower behind and drive home through streets slick with rain. The wipers keep time like a slow heartbeat. By the time the gates of the Stevens estate close behind me, the storm has softened to a whisper against the magnolias. Inside, the house is dark except for the golden slit of light beneath the library door. Charlotte is still awake. I pause in the hallway, listening. Only the scratch of a highlighter and the occasional turn of a page. At 18, she studies the way some girls chase boys with single-minded devotion. I push the door open quietly. She sits cross-legged on the window seat, surrounded by open textbooks and colored notes. A single lamp paints her in honey-colored light. Her hair, the same dark gold Julian had as a child, is twisted up with a pencil. She does not notice me at first. She is tracing the path of a nerve along a diagram of the human arm, mouthing the Latin names under her breath as though they are prayers. Charlotte has never asked for a new car, never pouted when her friends flew private to Aspen while she stayed home. When other girls her age were learning which fork to use at charity galas, she was volunteering at the free clinic on King Street, holding the hands of strangers who could not pronounce her last name. She still believes money is a tool, not a god. That belief is the rarest thing in this house, more precious than the land we own, more fragile than the thinnest crystal. She looks up then, startled, and smiles the way sunrise breaks over the marsh, slow and inevitable. "Grandmama, I thought you would be asleep. The gala prep must have exhausted you. I needed to see you before tomorrow," I say. She closes the textbook gently, marks her place with a ribbon the color of azaleas. "Is everything all right? You look far away." I take her hand. It is warm, ink-stained, steady, a healer's hand. "Charlotte," I say, my voice softer than, "do you know what I would do to keep this light inside you safe?" She tilts her head, puzzled. "You have always kept me safe." "No, darling, I have kept you comfortable. There is a difference." I look around the library, shelves climbing 20 feet, first editions, atlases older than the state itself, every volume paid for with long nights and longer silences. Julian used to come in here as a boy and pull the ladders along the tracks just to hear the wheels scream. Charlotte only ever came to read. "I would rather let the entire empire fall in my hands," I tell her, "than let it harm her soul." She searches my face, worry gathering like clouds. "Grandmama, you are frightening me." "Good," I whisper. Fear is cleaner than complacency. I stand, smoothing my skirt. The grandfather clock in the hall strikes 2. Tomorrow the sun will rise on a different world. "Promise me something," I say at the door. "Anything. If ever the day comes when everything you thought was solid crumbles, remember that crumbling is sometimes mercy. Some things have to break, so better things can grow." She nods, uncertain, hugging her textbook to her chest like armor. I leave her there in the circle of lamplight and walk the long corridor to my study. Inside the study, I pour 1 small inch of bourbon, Reginald's favorite, and raise the glass to the darkness. Easy success is the first poison I must strip from my son. I drink. The burn feels like justice. I never sleep the night before the gala. I sit in the small sitting room off my bedroom, door closed, listening to the old walls settle like an old woman easing into a chair. At 3:13 in the morning, I hear it. The soft click of the study door downstairs, the one I oiled myself last week so it would not creak. Then the whisper of stockinged feet on the Persian runner. Camille. I rise, wrap myself in the burgundy silk robe Reginald loved, and walk barefoot down the back staircase. The security cameras are already looping tonight's empty frames. I made certain of that hours ago. I stop on the landing where moonlight spills through the Palladian window and turns the marble floor silver. From here, I can see straight into the study through the half-open door. Camille stands at my desk in a black silk slip, hair twisted up, phone in one hand, the little flashlight in the other. She looks like a thief who is dressed for the opera. She spins the dial of the wall safe exactly as she must have watched me do 100 times. The door swings open with a sigh. She reaches in, eager, almost trembling. Her fingers close on the leather folio I left there for her. She opens it under the thin beam of light. Inside is only a photocopy of the covenant deed, thick cream paper, gold seal, my signature already dry across the bottom. Tucked beneath the ribbon is a single sheet of heavy stock in my handwriting. Collateral adjustment, phase 1. Nothing more. She flips through the pages again, faster, as though the real document might magically appear if she is rude enough to the paper. It does not. Julian steps in, barefoot like his wife, wearing only pajama bottoms. The hallway light behind him carves his shadow long across the rug. Camille startles, clutches the empty folio to her chest like contraband. Julian asked Camille if she had found anything, but she said she was just double-checking everything. Julian moved closer and looked at the open, empty safe. He revealed that he had moved the actual deed to the downtown vault the previous afternoon, right after she had tried to retrieve it. He scoffed at the idea that she might photograph the document for her father, suggesting that he wasn't as careless as she thought. Silence fell. Camille attempted to assert that they were still on the same side. Julian countered, questioning whether she intended to tell the senator about the empty safe or let him believe that he was the negligent one. Julian warned Camille to be careful, saying that secrets spill when enough pressure is applied. Finally, Julian said softly that tomorrow night they would smile together and take what was theirs, like a real family. He turns, walks out, leaves the door open behind him. Camille stands alone under the moonlight, clutching my decoy like a child who has been handed a pretty box and found it full of stones. After a moment, she slides the folio back exactly as she found it, closes the safe, spins the dial. She does not see me watching from the darkness. And Julian, walking back to their bedroom, never notices that the security feed he thought he controlled has been recording every second in high definition to a drive I keep in my dressing table. They each believe they are the cleverest person in the room. They have no idea the room itself is the trap. The Founders' Gala always smells the same. Gardenias forced into bloom, old money warmed by too many bodies, and the faint metallic edge of fear beneath perfume. Tonight, the grand ballroom of the Charleston Place Hotel glitters like a jewelry box someone shook too hard. 500 people in black tie and inherited pearls pretend they are here only for charity while they wait for blood. I stand at the top of the marble staircase, gloved hand resting on the banister my Reginald once carved with his initials when no one was looking. Below me, the orchestra swells into the waltz we played at our wedding. Julian insisted on it. Sentiment, he called it. I call it irony. He finds me at exactly 9:15, the moment the string quartet pauses and the room hushes for the tribute. Camille is on his arm, ice blue silk clinging to her like water, diamonds flashing at her throat with every breath. Charlotte follows 2 steps behind in the simple white dress I chose for her, eyes wide, sensing the storm but not yet wet. Julian kisses both my cheeks for the cameras. Flashbulbs pop like small gunshots. "Mother," he says loudly enough for the front tables to hear, "you have carried this family long enough. Tonight, we honor you." He produces the gift with a flourish, a thick cream envelope tied in navy ribbon. Inside, a single ticket. The room sighs with delight. What a thoughtful son. I smile the way I smiled the day he totaled his first Porsche and told me it was only a fender bender. Julian raises a crystal flute. The orchestra falls silent. 40 years ago, my father and mother founded Stevens Holdings on nothing but vision and grit. He begins, voice rich with rehearsed gratitude. Tonight, on this anniversary, I ask my mother to step into the rest she has earned. The covenant deed that controls the $200 million legacy trust has always required 2 signatures for transfer, hers and mine. He turns to me, eyes shining with triumph he believes is love. "Mother, will you sign the future over to the next generation?" The room holds its breath. I open the small evening bag, remove the leather folio I have carried all evening, and hold it out. The covenant deed, thick, official, ribbon, still perfect. The seal gleams under the chandeliers like fresh blood. 500 people applaud before the pen even touches paper. I take the Mont Blanc Julian offers. Julian leans close. "Sign it, Mother. It is time." I sign. One flowing stroke across the bottom line. Eleanor Margaret Stevens, in ink that will never wash out. The room erupts. Champagne corks pop. Camille's smile could cut glass. Julian lifts my hand to kiss it for the cameras. I use the moment to lean in, my lips brushing the shell of his ear so only he hears. "Son," I whisper, "you just stole a debt." He freezes, just for a heartbeat. Then the smile snaps back into place, wider, dazzling, and he turns to embrace me while the orchestra launches into Auld Lang Syne, and strangers rush forward to congratulate the new king. I let them hug me, kiss me, tell me how radiant I look for my age. I smile until my cheeks ache. Inside the smile, I am already gone. Across the room, Charlotte watches, confused, clutching her small purse with both hands. Our eyes meet. I give her the tiniest nod. She does not understand yet, but she will. Julian raises his glass again, voice booming with victory. They drink. They cheer. They believe they have witnessed a coronation. They have witnessed an execution. The chandeliers keep burning, bright and merciless, while the covenant deed changes hands for the last time tonight. In 48 hours, the banks will wake up. In 72, the phones will begin to ring. In 1 week, my son will understand the difference between inheriting an empire and inheriting a corpse. The hotel suite is too quiet after the roar of the gala. I lock the door, drop the beaded evening gown in a silver puddle, and stand in my slip, while Charleston keeps celebrating a victory that is already rotting. The cruise ticket lies on the desk like a white flag someone forced into my hand. I booked this room under a false name months ago, the night Julian first rehearsed his speech in the mirror, and I heard the word retire leave his mouth like a bullet. On the bed sits the small silver recorder. I have not listened to the message since the night I made it. My thumb hovers. One press and I can still stop everything. One phone call to Harold, one quiet transfer, and the doomsday clause sleeps forever. Julian wakes up king. Charlotte grows up believing her father is merely brilliant but misunderstood. The poison stays in the family veins for another generation. I pressed play and my own voice filled the room, a calm but merciless recording made 3 months ago, after I discovered that the Napa vineyard had been completely stripped to pay Julian's gambling debts. The recording began by gently calling Charlotte's name. The tape's content revealed that if Charlotte was listening to it, the worst had begun, and Julian had taken the covenant deed. Julian had no idea that the deed was collateral for a $92 million bridge loan I had personally signed to keep Stevens Holdings afloat after the 2019 waterfront lawsuit. The moment Julian's signature joined that contract, the debt immediately became his and Camille's personal liability. The banks would call in the debt within days, and everything Julian and Camille believed they had won would drag them under. I paused the tape. My hand was shaking, the bourbon glass rattling against my lips. I pressed play again. The following content explained the reason for this action. Julian had failed every test I had set for him, from the Miami condos, the port project, to the 8 separate transfers from the Legacy Trust to accounts in the Caymans. I had covered everything up so Charlotte would never see the monster wearing her father's face, but covering for him was killing the company and slowly killing Charlotte. By teaching her that love meant endless rescue, I would not let that lesson poison her anymore. The recording ended and the silence descended like cold water. I walked to the window. Far below, King Street is still drunk on string lights and Victory champagne. Somewhere in that glow, Julian is laughing, Camille is calculating tomorrow's headlines, and Charlotte is probably texting her friends about how strange I looked when I signed the papers. I could stop it. One call, one merciful lie. I think of Charlotte at 12, coming home from school in tears because a classmate said her daddy only got the yacht club membership because grandmama paid for it. I think of Julian at 38, drunk on our balcony, telling me I was holding him back because I refused to let him leverage the family name for a casino deal in Biloxi. I think of the way Camille looked at my jewelry during Christmas dinner last year, pricing each piece with her eyes. I have carried Julian's failures for 25 years. I will not carry them into the grave and leave Charlotte to dig them up later. I open the laptop, type the final authorization code, and hit send. The doomsday key is now irreversible. In 48 hours, the banks will move. In 72 hours, the news will feast. I stand in the dark between 2 futures. One where I save my son and damn my granddaughter's soul. One where I save the legacy and let my son drown in the life he chose. The hotel phone rings, shrill, shocking. The caller ID reads Richard Hayes, Camille's father, the senator who has been circling our shares like a shark since the wedding. He knows something is wrong. He always knows. And whatever he wants tonight will only quicken the blood already in the water. I reach for the receiver and let it ring. I hang up without answering. Whatever he is selling, I am no longer buying. The choice is made. I am somewhere over the dark Atlantic when the second act truly begins, when the poison I poured into the covenant deed finally reaches their hearts, and I can almost taste the metallic panic that must be flooding the boardroom 37 floors above Charleston. Julian and Camille, still flushed from last night's champagne and the thunderous applause that followed their coronation, stride into the executive suite at 9 o'clock sharp, trailing the scent of victory and gardenia, believing every soul in the building is now theirs to command, believing the city itself has bent its knee. The security guards straighten as they pass. The receptionists offer smiles bright enough to cut glass. The private elevator rises in hushed obedience, and when the doors slide open on the top floor, they step out hand in hand like children who have finally been told the entire toy store belongs to them alone. They walk the long corridor where portraits of Reginald and me once watched over every deal, where the carpet is thick enough to swallow the sound of their triumph, where the morning light pours through floor-to-ceiling windows and turns the harbor into molten gold beneath them. Camille's white suit is immaculate. Julian's cufflinks bear the family crest, and the leather folio containing the covenant deed is cradled against her breast, the way a bride carries flowers, reverent and greedy all at once. They pause at the threshold of the boardroom, exchange one last conspiratorial smile that says, "We did it. We actually did it." And then they cross the sacred space where I sat alone for 15 years, making decisions that kept this empire breathing while they partied in Miami and Monaco. Julian himself uncorks the bottle of Dom Perignon that has been waiting in the silver bucket since dawn, the cork popping like a starting gun, foam spilling over his knuckles in joyous white rivers. And Camille laughs the low, delighted laugh I have heard her use when new jewelry appears, or when someone else's reputation quietly dies. They drink straight from the bottle because no one is left to judge them, because the throne is finally warm beneath them, because the city glittering below belongs to the bold, and they have just proven how bold they are. Julian lifts the covenant deed with ceremonial reverence, the thick pages rustling like dry wings, the gold seal catching the light as he turns to the clause that matters most, the one that transfers every share, every trust, every brick and beam and secret offshore account into his name alone. And he begins to read the words aloud in a voice thick with emotion, believing he is tasting freedom when he is actually tasting the first drop of hemlock. Camille leans close, her eyes shining with plans already forming, and she whispers for him to read the final transfer line again because she wants to feel the moment settle into her bones forever. He obliges, voice rising with pride, fingers tracing the two signatures side by side, and for one suspended heartbeat, the room itself seems to hold its breath with them. Julian's phone rings. The sound is small and ordinary, yet it slices through the champagne haze like a scalpel. He frowns at the unknown number, swipes anyway because new kings answer every call, and the voice that greets him belongs to Martin Caldwell, Senior Vice President of the Trust Bank. "Mr. Stevens," Caldwell says, pursuant to the collateral activation clause embedded in Amendment 14C of the Covenant Deed, executed at 9:27 p.m. last evening, all company assets, operating accounts, and credit facilities have been frozen effective immediately, and the $92 million bridge loan your mother personally guaranteed in 2019 is now in default, with you and Mrs. Camille Hayes Stevens named as joint and several guarantors. The crystal flute slips from Julian's suddenly numb fingers and shatters into 1,000 expensive pieces across the table that once trembled beneath my own decisions. Camille watches the champagne bleed into the wood and feels the first cold thread of dread coil around her heart, because even before Julian repeats the words, she already understands that the kingdom they just claimed has been built on quicksand after all. While Julian and Camille are still staring at the shattered crystal in the boardroom, believing the worst has already found them, Charlotte is alone in the big house on the Battery, the one that suddenly feels too large and too quiet without my footsteps in the hall. She wanders upstairs after lunch, drawn by the silence that has settled like dust since the gala, and finds herself in my bedroom, the one no one has entered since I left for the cruise. Charlotte runs her fingertips along the dressing table, the silver-backed brushes, the crystal perfume bottles, everything exactly as I left it, as though the room is waiting for me to come back and finish a sentence I never started. Her gaze falls on the rosewood music box on the nightstand, the one Reginald brought home from Switzerland the week she was born, the one that has played the same lullaby every night of her childhood when I wound it for her. She has not heard it since she was small enough to believe grandmothers lived forever. Today, something pulls her toward it. Perhaps the loneliness, perhaps the strange look I gave her across the ballroom last night, the look that felt like goodbye and warning all at once. The lullaby begins, slow, familiar, heartbreaking. Beneath the faded velvet lining lies a small folded card in my handwriting, the ink still dark, the paper heavy and expensive. She knows my stationery the way other girls know their mother's perfume. She lifts the card with trembling fingers. Written across it in my unmistakable script are 9 words. This covenant must be activated on Father's birthday. Charlotte frowns, turns the card over, finds nothing else. Father's birthday is 6 weeks away. The covenant deed was signed last night. Everyone saw it. The whole city toasted it. She whispers the sentence aloud, tasting its strangeness, feeling the tiny hairs rise along her arms because the words feel less like instruction and more like prophecy. She sets the card down exactly as she found it, heart beating too fast, and only then notices that the velvet lining is slightly raised at one corner, as though something larger is hidden beneath. With the reverence of someone diffusing a bomb, she peels the lining back. Another envelope waits there, thick cream stalk sealed with black wax impressed by the same magnolia blossom I use on all my private letters. Across the front, in the same careful hand, "Do not open until everything falls apart." Charlotte stares at those words until they blur. The lullaby keeps playing, soft and relentless, the ballerina turning slow circles above the hidden envelope as though she too is guarding a secret too heavy for an 18-year-old heart. Charlotte's fingers hover, aching to break the seal, aching to understand why her grandmother, who has never once raised her voice, would leave instructions that sound like the beginning of the end. She does not open it. Not yet. She presses the lining back into place, closes the lid, silences the lullaby with a twist of the key, and stands in the quiet bedroom that suddenly feels like the calm before a hurricane no one else can see coming. Somewhere high above the ocean, I smile without meaning to, because the second piece of my message has found its way into the only hands I trust. And though Charlotte does not understand today, she will. When the boardroom 37 floors up begins to bleed and the empire her parents stole starts to devour them from the inside out. While Charlotte sits in the quiet bedroom holding the sealed envelope that tells her to wait until everything falls apart, Julian and Camille are discovering exactly how fast everything can fall when the ground beneath a fortune has been hollowed out for years. The first 48 hours after the bank's call are a controlled panic disguised as action. Julian storms through the executive floor like a man trying to outrun fire, barking orders that no one dares question yet, while Camille's manicured fingers fly across 3 phones at once, calling brokers, lawyers, private equity princes who owe her favors, anyone who might buy something before the creditors descend. They list the Napa Vineyard at half its value, the Aspen Chalet at 1/3, the fractional share in the Gulf Stream, the 2 Bugattis, even the wine cellar that took Reginald 20 years to curate. Offers trickle in, then evaporate the moment due diligence touches the frozen accounts. By the 3rd morning, they are in my private office, tearing through drawers and safes and the fireproof cabinet behind Reginald's portrait, hunting for anything liquid, anything unencumbered, anything that might still carry the Stevens name without the poison now attached to it. Camille finds the hidden compartment I designed myself in 2019, the one no one knew existed except Harold and me. Inside is a single red legal folder marked only with the year. She opens it with trembling fingers. The top page is the original 2019 settlement demand from the waterfront lawsuit, $92 million personal guarantee, covenant deed listed as substitute collateral if the company ever changed control without bank consent. Every page beneath is stamped paid in full in red, except the final rider, the one that triggers the moment Julian's signature joined mine. Camille's breath catches when she sees the clause I underlined twice in black ink. Upon joint execution by successor trustee, guarantors Julian R. Stevens and Camille H. Stevens jointly and severally assume all liability. Julian reads over her shoulder, face draining of color the way champagne drained from the broken flute. "She planned this," he whispers, voice cracking E. "Mother didn't retire. She booby-trapped the entire empire and handed us the detonator with a smile." Camille slaps the folder shut, eyes wild. "We can fight it. Restraining order, fraud, undue influence." Julian is already shaking his head because even he understands that every judge in Charleston still remembers who kept the lights on during the recession, who funded the hospital wing, who never once missed a charity gala check. They are not fighting a contract. They are fighting a saint. They spend the rest of the day on frantic calls, voices growing hoarse, promises growing thinner, until the sun bleeds out over the harbor and the office lights burn cold and lonely around them. Camille steps out to take a call from her father, the senator's voice calm, regretful, already distancing himself. Julian sits alone at my desk, head in his hands, staring at the covenant deed that now feels radioactive. One new email, no subject, sender address a string of random numbers. He almost deletes it, then clicks. A single attachment. A scanned purchase order dated 4 years ago, $12 million wired to a shell company in the Caymans for a condominium project that never broke ground. Initial approval line signed in my own unmistakable hand, ES. Beneath it, a second page, bank transfer confirmation to an account ending in the same 4 digits as the private account Camille uses for household expenses. Julian stares until the screen blurs. The document is real. I made sure of that. But the transfer to Camille's account was never authorized by me. Someone else added it. Someone with access. Someone who wanted Julian to see this exact page at this exact moment. He looks toward the door where Camille is still pacing, phone to her ear, telling her father everything is under control. Because now Julian understands that the trap his mother set might be cruel, but someone has been tightening the wire around his throat while pretending to help him breathe. And whoever sent that email is still watching. I'm sipping coffee on a terrace in Lisbon, the Atlantic glittering like broken glass below me, when I decide the time has come to turn the knife a 1/4 inch more. I drafted a simple email, no greeting, no signature, sent from an address that would self-destruct upon reading. I typed slowly, savoring each word like tasting poison. The email told Julian that by now the banks had called, and he understood the weight of the covenant deed he was so eager to claim. I explained that I did not want to do this, but his repeated abuse of the legacy trust left me no other choice. Over the past 4 years, more than $28 million were transferred without board approval transfers I quietly covered to save the family's reputation. I stressed that I could not stand by and watch the empire that his grandfather and I built be continually gutted for private jets, gambles, and Cayman's accounts. The collateral clause was the only way to force him to take responsibility. I expressed my apology that it had to come to this. I attached a carefully edited ledger, enough truth to wound, but not enough to reveal the deeper plan, and then I pressed send before the sun fully rose over Charleston. Within hours, the email has been forwarded to every board member, every society columnist, every former friend who still pretends to care. By noon, the Post and Courier runs the headline, "Stevens heir accused of squandering trust in mother's damning letter." By 2 o'clock, the junior board members, those I personally mentored, issue a joint statement expressing grave concern and calling for Julian's immediate suspension pending investigation. By 4, the charity circuits that once fawned over Camille now murmur behind champagne flutes that perhaps Eleanor was pushed too far by an ungrateful son. Julian reads my words on the giant screen in the executive conference room, face bloodless, while Camille watches the stock ticker bleed red in real time. Reporters camp outside the lobby. Former friends stop answering texts. The narrative flips with merciless speed. Julian is no longer the bold young heir saving the company from a tired matriarch. He is the reckless prodigal who forced his own mother to destroy him to protect what little remained. They still do not know what the original $92 million lawsuit was truly about. Only that it existed, only that I paid it quietly so no one would ever have to know the details. They still believe the worst is the debt and the public shame. They are wrong, because the one asset I never listed, never mortgaged, never allowed to appear on any balance sheet Julian could find is the Magnolia Estate. 3,000 acres of prime low-country waterfront I quietly deeded to an irrevocable trust in Charlotte's name the day she was born. It is free and clear, worth more than everything else they are losing combined, and it is the blade I have kept hidden for the final cut. Julian sits alone in the darkening boardroom long after Camille has fled to call her father, staring at the city lights that no longer feel like his. He thinks the fall is nearly over, that the bottom is in sight, that surviving the next few weeks is all that remains. He has no idea that the real bottom, the one that will shatter every last illusion of recovery, is still waiting quietly under the magnolia trees he used to climb as a child. I am tracing the cool stone balustrade of a Moorish palace in Sintra, watching swallows wheel against a sky the color of tarnished silver, when the next carefully timed blade slides between Julian's ribs with the precision of a surgeon who has practiced the cut for years. Senator Richard Hayes chooses the marble steps of the South Carolina State House on a Tuesday morning drenched in spring sunlight, the American and state flags snapping behind him like banners of judgment, while a semicircle of cameras and reporters waits breathlessly for whatever sorrowful wisdom the patriarch of one of Charleston's most powerful families has decided to bestow upon a city that has always courted his favor. He stands there in a navy suit cut to perfection, the silver at his temples catching the light exactly as his media advisors planned, and delivers a statement so measured, so regretful, so devastating that every word lands like a hammer on already cracked glass. With a heavy heart, he begins, voice resonant with the cadence that has swayed juries and voters for 3 decades. The Hayes Family Foundation must withdraw all pledged funding for the Stevens Holdings Harbor Renaissance Project, a development that promised so much for our coastal communities, yet has now been overshadowed by grave financial irregularities at the very highest levels of the company's leadership. He pauses just long enough for the cameras to zoom on the sorrow in his eyes, sorrow that any fool can see is polished and rehearsed, before continuing with the calm authority of a man who has never once in his life needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. The people of South Carolina deserve leaders who place public trust above personal ambition, and until a full and transparent accounting is provided, continued support would compromise the integrity of politics itself and the taxpayer dollars that might one day be implicated in any federal inquiry. The reporters erupt, questions tumbling over one another, but the senator raises one manicured hand in gentle benediction, declining further comment, turning away with the dignified sorrow of a father forced to discipline a wayward child, leaving the microphones hungry and the city stunned. Within minutes, the clip is looping on every local station, the headline banners screaming, "Hayes pulls plug on Stevens mega project amid scandal." And by the time the stock market opens, the remaining investors who had clung to Julian's promises scatter like leaves before a hurricane. Construction cranes that were scheduled to pierce the sky next month now destined to rust on barges, while the harbor itself seems to hold its breath in shame. Julian watches the broadcast from the library of the mansion that no longer feels like home, the same room where he once posed for magazine covers with Camille's arm linked through his, both of them laughing at how easily the world rearranged itself for people born to the right name. Now the enormous screen shows his father-in-law's calm, patrician face delivering the coup de grace while pretending to wipe away a tear that never quite falls, And Julian feels the floor tilt beneath him, the way it tilted the day the bank first froze every account bearing the Stevens name. Camille stands behind him, pale as the marble statues in the garden, phone clutched so tightly her knuckles have gone bloodless. And when Julian's own phone buzzes on the desk with a private number, he answers because drowning men will grasp, even at knives disguised as ropes. "Julian," Senator Hayes says, voice warm as aged bourbon laced with arsenic, "I am truly sorry it had to play out this way in public, but you left me no choice once the numbers became impossible to ignore." He pauses just long enough for the silence to settle like a shroud before continuing with the gentle implacability of a man who has never lost a negotiation in his life. "There is still a path forward, a quiet transfer of the remaining voting shares to the foundation as a charitable contribution. And in return, I will personally guarantee a restructuring facility, settle the bridge debt out of court, and keep any federal investigation from turning into a spectacle that would destroy Charlotte's future as well." Another pause, perfectly timed, perfectly cruel. "Give me the shares, Julian, and I will settle everything." Think of Camille. The line goes dead before Julian can form a reply, leaving only the soft hush of the mansion and the weight of a message that was never rescue at all, but the velvet-gloved demand of a man who intends to own whatever scraps remain once the carcass has been picked clean. Camille finally speaks, voice thin as the ice that forms on the Ashley River in rare winters, telling him that Daddy can still fix this, that he always fixes things, that they should be reasonable. But Julian only turns to her slowly, seeing for the first time the reef that has been tearing the bottom out of his life, while smiling and calling it love. The senator's next strike will not be a rescue. It will be the fatal blow delivered with the same sorrowful smile he wore on the State House steps, and Julian is only just beginning to understand how thoroughly he has been weighed, measured, and discarded by every hand he ever trusted. I am sipping tea beneath a pergola of bougainvillea in Seville when the final act of their ruin begins to play out exactly as I wrote it years ago, every detail falling into place like the slow, inevitable closing of a very old and very heavy door. The eviction notice arrives at the Stevens mansion on a Thursday morning that smells of rain and defeat, delivered by two deputy sheriffs who stand awkwardly beneath the portico, while Julian and Camille watch movers in cheap uniforms carry out the Biedermeier chairs, the Aubusson rugs, the silver that has been in our family since before the war between the states. Camille stands on the sweeping staircase in yesterday's silk blouse and yesterday's diamonds, voice rising to a pitch that makes the deputies shift their weight, insisting that there has been some mistake, that her father will have this corrected within the hour, but the papers are signed by a federal judge and the locks are already being changed behind them. Julian does not speak until they are alone on the sidewalk, suitcases at their feet like refugees, the great iron gate swinging shut with the finality of a prison door. Then he walks back into the house through the service entrance one last time, moving like a man in a trance, and tears open the study safe that Camille thought only she knew how to find. Inside, beneath the false bottom she never discovered, lies a manila envelope marked simply Julian in Camille's perfect lethal handwriting. He opens it with shaking fingers. Divorce papers, prepared 6 months ago, already signed by her, waiting only for his ruin to make them profitable. A cover letter from her attorney explains that in light of recent financial developments, she will be seeking full custody, alimony based on the lifestyle to which she has become accustomed, and a complete separation of assets before the creditors can touch what little remains. Julian stands in the empty study, the echo of his own breathing the only sound, and feels the last thread connecting him to the life he thought was his snap, like a worn violin string. He spends the next 48 hours in a borrowed condo above a King Street bar, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, making frantic calls to anyone who still takes them, until a hedge fund acquaintance from his Yale days agrees to buy whatever voting shares remain at 10 cents on the dollar. They meet in the back room of a law firm that once begged for Stevens Holdings business, papers spread across a table that smells of desperation and stale coffee. Julian signs. His pen has barely lifted from the page when every television in the lobby flickers to the same breaking news banner. Stevens Holdings shares declared worthless. Covenant deed debt exceeds all assets. The anchor's voice is calm, almost kind, explaining that a federal filing moments ago confirmed the $92 million bridge loan has attached to every share personally guaranteed by Julian Reginald Stevens, rendering the entire block valueless until the debt is satisfied in full. The investor across the table is already standing, folding the unsigned contract with regretful politeness, murmuring something about force majeure and changed circumstances. When the door opens and Senator Richard Hayes walks in, wearing a charcoal suit and the faintest smile of a man who has come to collect a debt that was never written down, Julian looks up, the pen still warm in his hand, and understands in one crushing instant that the buyer was never real, that the meeting was arranged, that the final humiliation has been choreographed down to the minute by the man who once called him son. The senator places one manicured hand on Julian's shoulder, gentle as a hangman adjusting the rope, and says softly, "You should have taken my offer when it was still an offer, Julian. Some doors, once closed, do not open again." I am watching the sun bleed into the Guadalquivir when Julian finally reaches the darkest room of the soul I prepared for him so many years ago. He is alone in the rented condominium that smells of other people's fried food and despair, the last suitcase still unopened in the corner, when he decides to tear through the final box Camille left behind in her haste to flee to her father's compound. Inside, beneath tissue-wrapped Louboutins she no longer needs, lies a locked metal document case he has never seen before. The key is taped to the bottom, as though she wanted him to find it eventually. He opens it with hands that have begun to shake from lack of sleep and too much bourbon. The prenuptial agreement is on top, thick, bound in blue vellum, dated 3 weeks before their wedding. He remembers signing it in the senator's study while Camille laughed about boring paperwork and poured champagne. He remembers believing love made such things irrelevant. Clause 17b is highlighted in calm yellow marker. In the event that Julian Reginald Stevens shall lose operational control of Stevens Holdings or any successor entity thereto, whether by resignation, removal, bankruptcy, or other cause, all voting shares held in his name or in trust shall irrevocably transfer to the Hayes Family Foundation for charitable purposes, free of any claim by Julian R. Stevens or his heirs. Camille's signature is beneath his, clear and elegant. The senator's witness signature is beneath hers. Julian reads it 3 times, the words refusing to arrange themselves into anything but perfect, merciless betrayal. Every step of the collapse, the gala, the frozen accounts, the public crucifixion, the fake buyer, the worthless shares, clicks into place like the tumblers of a lock he himself helped design. His mother laid the trap. His wife baited it. His father-in-law waited with the net. He staggers to the small balcony that overlooks a Charleston now indifferent to his name, clutching the framed photograph he rescued from the mansion the last Christmas before everything tilted. All 4 of them smiling beneath the magnolia tree that gave the estate its name. Reginald alive and proud, Eleanor serene, Camille radiant, himself young and certain the world would never dare disappoint a Stevens. He stares at the photograph until the faces blur, until he understands with a clarity that feels like dying that every person in that picture, except Charlotte, has been playing a longer, colder game than he ever imagined, and that the collapse was never accidental, never salvageable, never anything but perfectly calculated from the moment he first whispered to Camille that his mother was losing her edge. The room tilts. The bourbon bottle is empty. The city lights swim. He is turning back inside, meaning to hurl the photograph into the dark when his bare foot brushes something hard beneath the rug. He pulls it back. A small silver recorder, my recorder, The one I used the night I first confessed lies there like a black pearl someone placed for him to find. His thumb finds the play button without permission. My voice fills the room, calm, familiar, merciless. The tape's content informed Julian that everything he thought he owned was gone. I admitted he would blame me, and that was true, but only partially. I revealed that there was one asset I never listed or mortgaged, and that was the Magnolia estate. I explained that the Magnolia estate had been transferred to Charlotte on the day she was born, held in an irrevocable trust. Only Charlotte could access this asset when she turned 21 or when I released it sooner. I emphasized that the property was worth more than everything Julian had lost combined. It was the seed of a new empire, one that would not bear Julian's name or Camille's greed. I had taken everything from him so that something pure could grow for the only child in this family who still had a soul. The recording ends. Julian stands in the half-light, the photograph forgotten on the floor, the recorder heavy in his palm, understanding at last that the darkest night is not the fall itself, but the moment he realizes the fall was mercy. Because somewhere across the ocean, darling, I am already booking a flight home, and the empire I will build next will rise from the exact ground he once believed was his forever. I step off the small charter plane onto the tarmac at Charleston Executive just after dawn, the low-country air thick with salt and resurrection, and for the first time in months I feel the ground beneath me recognize its owner again. The Magnolia estate has waited patiently. 3,000 acres of untouched waterfront that never once appeared on any schedule Julian or Camille could steal. Its deed quietly transferred to Charlotte's irrevocable trust the day she drew her first breath. I drive myself there in a plain black sedan no one expects Eleanor Stevens to own. The house itself, white columns, wide verandas, the magnolia Reginald planted the year Julian was born, stands exactly as I left it, serene and unashamed. By 9 o'clock, I am seated across from my private counsel, Thomas Langford, in the small law office on Broad Street that has served this family since Reconstruction. The papers are already prepared. A motion to substitute the Magnolia estate as collateral for the old bridge loan, a petition to nullify the personal guarantees that now hang like millstones around Julian's neck, and the charter for a new entity, Magnolia Trust, that will rise clean from the ashes of everything they burned. Thomas slides the final document across the table. All we require, he says quietly, is Julian's consent as the current trustee of record. Without it, the bankruptcy court will simply liquidate everything, and the Magnolia estate remains locked until Charlotte is 21. He can still sue to block the restructuring, and given his state of mind, I nod, having expected this last lock on the door I built. Send the summons to Charlotte, I tell him. She will sign whatever is needed to release the trust early. The rest will follow. Charlotte arrives at 11, eyes wide beneath the brim of a simple straw hat, still carrying the music box I left for her like a talisman. She has listened to every recording, read every letter, understood at last why her grandmother became the storm that swallowed her parents whole. She sits beside me without hesitation, takes the pen Thomas offers, and signs her name across documents that will make her the youngest landowner of consequence in the state. We are one signature away from resurrection. Thomas's assistant opens the door to show in the next appointment, and the air in the room turns to ice. Camille stands on the threshold thinner than I remember, diamonds gone, designer suit, replaced by something off the rack, eyes red-rimmed but still sharp enough to cut. She's been abandoned by Julian's rage and her father's calculation, left with nothing but the clothes on her back and the bitter knowledge that every bridge she crossed has been burned behind her. Her gaze moves from me, serene, silver-haired, unmistakably victorious, to Charlotte, whose pen has just finished the final flourish on the trust release that will fund an empire Camille will never touch. Then she understands exactly what those papers mean, exactly whose hand now holds everything she schemed to steal, and the sound that escapes her is not quite human. I stand on the veranda of the Magnolia Estate at sunrise, watching the mist rise off the river like the last breath of everything that had to die so something honest could live. Julian arrives at 9:30, unshaven, suit rumpled, eyes red from nights that have offered no sleep and no mercy. He signs the consent decree without a word, releasing the corpse of Stephen's holdings to whatever fate the courts decide, while quietly, irrevocably, clearing the path for the Magnolia Trust to be born clean. By noon, the filings are complete. The old company is surrendered to its creditors, the debts are restructured against the land that was never theirs to gamble, and the new charter is recorded under a name that belongs only to Charlotte and to me. Magnolia Trust, smaller, quieter, built on soil no one could poison. Charlotte stands beside me in the library that is now hers, the same room where she once studied anatomy textbooks while her parents planned their coup. She is 21 in 3 months, but today she signs as trustee, as heir, as the future. I place the old music box in her hands and tell her it is time to wind it again. Only this time the lullaby will play for a world we build together, brick by careful brick, without greed, without shortcuts, without the rot that ate her father hollow. Julian now pours coffee in a downtown cafe where customers no longer recognize the man who once arrived in a Bentley. Camille stocks shelves at a boutique that once sold her the dresses she can no longer afford. They live in separate one-bedroom apartments paid for by wages that arrive weekly instead of quarterly. And when their paths cross in the grocery store, they look through each other as though the marriage, the mansion, the empire, were all a fever dream that left only scars. I never apologize, I never explain again. The recordings, the letters, the quiet machinery of justice have already done their work. Charleston society whispers for a season and then moves on to the next scandal, because that is what society does. The creditors are satisfied, the banks are whole, the harbor will still be developed. On the first board meeting of Magnolia Trust, Charlotte takes the chair at the head of the table that was once mine, and I sit to her right, silver-haired advisor to a girl whose eyes are clear and unafraid. We break ground on the first project, and the city that once watched us fall now watches us rise differently. Justice is served, darling, not with shouting or tears, but with the quiet, relentless certainty of a tide that washes everything clean. The drama is fully exposed, the masks are burned, the ledger is balanced. And beneath the great magnolia Reginald planted the year Julian was born, Charlotte and I plant something new, a legacy that will never again be mistaken for inheritance. This is the end. Rest now. The story is finished and the house is finally, truly, at peace. Come here, darling. Closer, yes, just like that. Let the screen glow soft between us, the way the lamp used to glow when I told you the whole long truth. Did this story touch the place that still hurts when you remember the ones who took everything you gave and called it theirs? Did you feel seen, the way I felt seen by you tonight? Tell me in the comments. Whisper it to me like we're sharing the same cup of tea in the dark. What city are you watching from right now? I want to know the streets that hold your heart the same way Charleston once held mine. If even one tear fell, or one breath caught, or one fist unclenched while you listened, please, leave me a little heart, a word, anything. And if you can, send a super thanks, even the smallest one. Your kindness is the only legacy that truly multiplies. On screen, you will see 2 new real-life stories I chose just for you. Watch them when you're ready. There are so many more waiting on the channel, each one whispered the same way, just between us. Don't forget to subscribe, my dear, so the next time the house is quiet and the night feels too heavy, you'll know I'm already here, waiting with fresh tea and another truth only we understand. Thank you for staying until the very last note of the music box. I felt you here with me, with all my love and respect, until the next story. Good night, darling. Sleep soft, you are not alone.